Welcome to Living Yoga. My name is Darren Main, and this podcast is dedicated to all things about yoga, living well and healthy, both inside and out. And I love to bring people on this podcast to help me live a better yoga life and inspire me in different ways. Today, we're going to talk to Zach Beach. He's a fantastic Bay Area-based yoga teacher and also an author. He's got a book called The 7 Lessons of Love and several others, and a new one on the way. And we're going to talk about compassion and love as a yoga practice. We often think of yoga only as these poses we do on a yoga mat. Today, we're going to take it to the heart. Before I dive into that, I'm going to post links and other resources, including Zach's website, in the show notes. And I'll also post links to my content and social media in the show notes as well. If you have any comments or questions, drop them in the comments and we will try to answer them if we can. With that, I'm going to bring in Zach and we're going to talk about love. I feel like one of those easy listening radio DJs. Here's some love, a love song for you and someone special.
Light some candles.
Yeah. Zach, it is so good to have you on. You're one of my favorite people. I love the work you're doing, and I love your focus on love.
Thank you, Darren.
I think it's, no pun intended, the heart of yoga. How's that?
Oh, good.
The dad
Very
jokes
nice.
are just going to keep coming.
I love it.
I want to dive into this topic, but I would love to hear a little bit about you and your work, just generally for people who might not be familiar with you yet. I think a lot of yoga teachers, when we're going through yoga teacher training, dream of teaching the perfect handstand or getting on the cover of Yoga Journal for, putting your foot behind your head or something. I don't think a lot of people go through teacher training and say, I want to be known as the yoga teacher who wrote a book about love, which makes you stand out and makes you extra cool. But I'm wondering how you arrived at that. Why that focus?
My ego just keeps getting inflating just talking to you.
I try.
So you bring up a very important point that many people do initially come to yoga for its physical benefits. And sometimes we're even recommended to yoga. So that's what happened to me. I hurt my back when I was 20 and herniated a disc in my lower lumbar. And my physical therapist was like, you should try yoga. And I kind of scoffed at the time. I distinctly remember being like, yoga, I can breathe and stretch by myself. Thank you very much. But it changed my life, obviously. And it healed my back and is stronger than ever before. And it was a wonderful gateway. And I think many people experience that. They go to yoga because they want the handstand. They want the ankle behind the head. And it's very attractive to the Western mindset that, oh, yes, it might, help you lose weight and help you build muscle. And as you get deeper into the practice, you realize all those physical benefits are absolutely secondary to the true transformation that yoga provides. So I do think of the step 0, I call it in yoga, before we take any steps, before we go even to step 1, we take step 0, which is setting our intention, which means reflecting on what truly matters most to us in life. So I didn't start out as a love guy. I started out as a yoga practitioner and doing this process of reflecting on what truly matters most in life and setting an intention to live from that place. So it's very iterative, this process of setting and living from intention. And for me, just after a few years of practice, I was like, love is what matters. Love is why we are here. Love is our true nature. If you're looking for God or meaning or happiness or joy or connection in your life, just cultivate love. That will be the answer to all the problems of your human condition.
I just had, as you were saying that, I don't know if you've seen Moulin Rouge, but I felt like we really need to do the Elephant Love Medley song, and I will take the part of Nicole Kidman, and you can be Ewan McGregor.
Awesome. I would love to be Ewan McGregor.
I think that I've always wanted to be Nicole Kidman. I'm sure if she's watching this
Moulin Rouge,
podcast,
Nicole
a part
Kidman.
of her soul, or part of her soul just died. Well, the word love is one of those words that we all use it a million times a day, but I think it means so many different things to so many different people. And we have all these different kinds of love: romantic love, the love of a parent for a child, the love of two friends. Um, and for this word and this concept that we all know it when we see it, sort of, maybe, um, it's really hard to pin down. It's hard to define. It's hard to understand. We write poems and songs about it, but we like, what the heck is it? And I'm wondering if you have a definition or a framework by which you understand love.
Well, I have a framework that I learned from yoga. I didn't invent this framework. It's true that we are absolutely kind of told this basic idea that love is the great ineffable, cannot be described. And absolutely, when we are in love, we often feel its ineffability. It's just ecstasy that can't be described. But we can go right into the yogic text, we can go right into the scriptures, and we will find a very straightforward approach to cultivating love in our life. So at one point we talked about having an episode on Sanskrit, and you're like, Zach, it's a little technical. People might not want to learn about these things. Well, I'm going to have to go right into verse 1.33 from Patanjali's Yoga
Oh, I
Sutras
love it when you
because
quote verses.
because it's right here. People stop at 1.2. Yoga is the calming of the mind, the restraining of the mind, mind. It's like, okay, but guess what? 21 sutras later, you have Patanjali saying, by cultivating attitudes of friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and equanimity toward the wicked, the mind remains calm. So, to get the mind to become calm, we cultivate a love in our heart. And that right there is what is known as the four Brahmaviharas, the four noble qualities. And these provide a really solid framework for how we can bring love into our lives. And it all begins with love being a genuine concern for another person's well being. So when that love touches somebody that is happy, like right now with you, I'm feeling a lot of loving kindness for you, Darren. That
Oh,
metta, that quality of like, just two souls enjoying each other. And that's because we're not suffering. I mean, we're probably suffering in our own lives, but we haven't gotten into it. Now, if our love touches somebody that's suffering, it turns into compassion. If our love touches somebody that's doing amazing in life, it turns into sympathetic joy. And that all stems from love being a genuine concern for another person's well being. And we have those three layers of love. It's just a 3-layer cake, a lovely, delicious cake that we can bring into our lives. And the model is right there. From 2,000 years ago, we have a straightforward approach to cultivating love into our lives.
nice. Well, let's talk about when you said it turns into compassion when somebody is suffering. Um, there's no shortage of suffering in our world, big and small, in our personal lives, and turn on the evening news. And I think, I know I can, and I suspect many can feel pretty overwhelmed by all of that. Like, what's the point? I'm never going to solve the problem, never going to end suffering, so why bother? And yet, there's something about compassion that is profoundly healing, not necessarily problem solving, but healing. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, because it's sort of this magical ingredient that seems to be missing in our world at large,
Mm.
but that has this incredible power to transform things. And I suspect you have some thoughts on that.
I have many thoughts, feelings, and ideas around this. Um, I'll just begin because my theme yesterday in my yoga class was straight from the Gita. As Krishna tells Arjuna, you must act. This is one of the fundamental lessons of the Gita. You must act. Even staying in bed, still acting. Getting out of bed is another action. And we combine our action with non-attachment to the results of our actions. So yes, we go to the yoga mat to stand on our head, put our ankle behind the head, touch our toes. None of that might happen, right? I even had a student in class the other day. She's like, yeah, the first downward dog, I tweaked my neck and I had to lie down. And I was like, well, it's a good thing we are remaining not attached to the outcome. We're not truly here to cultivate or attain any goal. So I think this is a really encouraging advice to, anyone who's like an activist in the world. Like whether you are working for climate change or Palestine or plastic in the ocean, it can absolutely seem like your actions aren't making a difference. Well, if we can act without attachment to the results of our actions, then it really frees us up, and it recognizes that, yes, as just one human being, there's only so much you can do. But that's why we start with ourselves.
Hmm.
And go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to go into the 4 layers of compassion, but that's a new subject. So let's hear your thoughts.
Keeping it light, aren't we? No, as you were saying that, I was just reflecting on, as we're recording this, there's a presidential campaign happening, and Kamala Harris
is there?
She's this person who evidently might be president someday, but she's introduced the word joy into her campaigning. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, that is so brilliant to make these, like, so many politicians use base negative emotions to inspire people. Not naming names, but many of them do it.
Fear is a very strong motivator. If you can get a population afraid of the other, we call this unreal othering in meditation, that will be extremely motivating to get people to be for your cause.
Yeah. But I do believe the antidote to that fear is compassion, love, and joy, right? When we enter into that space of, like, just seeing you as a human being, seeing you as a person in need of maybe not a literal hug, but at least an energetic hug, it breaks down those false barriers. And I think introducing that into a political campaign is the perfect antidote to what others are doing. But so you were going to geek out on us, and I interrupted you. I know that getting between you and geeky yoga philosophy is like getting between a dog and a dog food bowl. So I want to keep my hand. And I'm actually deeply interested in what you were going to say. So run with it.
Okay. Because you talked about joy, let me just give you a few. This is geeky here. We have some love equations for you. So just to summarize the Brahma-Viharas, love plus pain equals compassion. Love plus friendliness equals kindness or loving kindness. And love plus happiness equals joy. And I wanted to, just touch on that joy that you are experiencing from a political candidate that you love. And it is so much more inspiring to support the cause of joy than to feel like we have to do things out of fear. And you touch on a very, very important piece of compassion. Is it arises from commonness, from sameness, from recognizing everyone you meet is a brother and a sister, and we're all in this together. So a lot of fear tactics and even authoritarian tactics are designed to create the other. And I really like Jack Kornfield's term, the enemy du jour, is you go throughout each decade of history and you will find the enemy of the day that we have to act against these other people. And sometimes it's, throughout history, it's been different countries. Throughout history, it's been different subsets of the population. And it's that unreal othering that is the cause of much violence in the world. So compassion does arise from in yoga, we might say seeing the Purusha, seeing the Atman, seeing the soul, seeing the heart. It's a heart-to-heart connection. Because the mind can be extremely discriminative about individual differences. All right, the mind is keen at separation. And it's the heart that sees the underlying connection within us all. So as Rumi would say, the lamps are different, but the light is the same. Here we are in our different lamps. Some lamps are taller, some lamps are shorter, some lamps have more melanin, some lamps have less melanin, some lamps have big nose, some lamps have small nose. But underneath it all, the light is the same. And when we recognize that sameness, compassion naturally arises and naturally grows. And you're right, I can geek out a little bit too much on these things. So rather than get super technical into the 4 layers of compassion, let me just go to the final layer of compassion, which is an intention to help. So after we get into the mental recognition of suffering, the emotional recognition of suffering, the motivation to act, we set that intention to help. So in this way, compassion is not only a gateway to love, but it's also a gateway to a life of service. And that is the other lesson from the Gita. We must let go of all our egoic-based desires, all our actions which are only meant to serve ourselves, to release all those attachments to our own well-being and to be in service of others and to live a life of compassion.
Let me ask you a practical question, because I'm sure most people listening to this are like, yeah, love, good. I like love. Love is awesome. I read about it on a Hallmark card once. No one says, I think we need more hate in this world, right? But being able to stay in that state of love or return to that state of love when we find we've drifted off course is another thing entirely. It's like, oh, yes, we're all God's children. And then somebody says something hateful or that you disagree with on social media, and you're like, they're evil. They should be banned. Or, like, I need to write something humiliating and shame them publicly. Or you're sitting across the table from, a relative who thinks or votes differently than you, or your partner cheats on you, or whatever. There's a million ways in which we find ourselves not in that state, where not being in that state seems justified and very, very easy to go there. I'm wondering how your yoga practice helps you to swim against that tide, that sort of pull that we all have into division, into it's just easier to be in a hateful space or a fearful space. How does yoga help us counter that?
So many wonderful points, Darren. Going back also
Especially
to
the part about the Hallmark card, right?
Exactly. People have such lovey-dovey, gooey ideas about love, a lot of which based on how we kind of grew up and what ideas we were kind of fed. And you're right. We want our hearts to be open. So even yesterday, I asked students, what do you want to work on? Somebody said, heart openers. Through all my years of teaching, I've yet to have a student ask for heart closers. So within every human being, there is a yearning to love. Within every human being, there's a yearning for the heart to open. And this is also a lovely gateway to compassion. Understanding we all have a fundamental goodness, right? What Thomas Merton calls a secret inner beauty. And this is a wonderful gateway to loving others. Even those people that you feel like are doing violence or doing wrong things in the world, even the people you deeply disagree with, they too have a longing to love and be loved. Their heart too yearns and wants to be open. And here's my other Sanskrit word for you today, which is bhav, which is bhavana. So one way to think about meditation is bhavana, which means a cultivation, which means a
Can you spell that for us?
Bhav. And then
Okay.
suffixes in Sanskrit are always based on kind of where it is in the sentence, but Bhavana is bhavana, which means cultivation. So when you're like, how do we remain in this state? Well, we are cultivating. this state. We are tending the garden of our minds. How do you keep a plant from growing? You have to nourish it. You have to give it the light and the water and the nutrients that it needs. So how do we keep our love growing? We have to nourish it. Many people know what it takes for plants to grow. What does it take for humans to grow? Presence and loving attention. So even when we say Loka samasta sukino bhavantu, that same bhav right there at the end, we are cultivating, we are bringing into existence a loving kindness and compassion for all beings. So we are here to tend the garden of the mind from the fertile earth of the heart. And how do we do that? We plant seeds. Seeds, seeds, seeds. What do we call those seeds? Sankalpas, intentions.
Yeah. Well said. Um, I'm wondering, we have a few minutes left, and I'm wondering if you could talk about, and maybe it's not obvious, or maybe it is, how your teaching, the way you present yoga and offer yoga to your students, might differ from the average yoga class, being that it is so centered. Like a lot of yoga teachers sit down and they think, what's the theme for my class? And I'm going to make it handstands or something, which is great. I love those classes. But you sort of theme your classes differently, and you present yoga, I think, in a way that's very consistent with traditional yoga, but maybe a little different than the way modern yoga is often presented. And I'm wondering how that looks different, what things you're doing to sort of invite this into your practice rather than just, let's do a handstand.
Well, as you know, Darren, yoga is just an experience. My words can only point to the moon, and you have to experience, you have to be there to understand. But in the few minutes that we have together, I'll just mention something I learned from Pema Chodron a long time ago. And she wrote that underlying all self-improvement is self-aggression. So all of our self-improvement projects, to gain muscle, to lose weight, yes, to meditate and have a calm mind, have a certain underlying self-aggression that there's something wrong with who you are in this moment, that there's something that could be improved upon. So if there's one attitude I try to bring to all my classes, is a paradox, actually. And then I go back to Jung. It says, if it's not a paradox, it's not true. Paradox actually gets us closer to truth than any single sentence. We are combining a desire to grow, a desire to improve, with a total acceptance of who we are and where we are in this moment.
Yeah.
So we are a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. So we are simultaneously, yes, we're maybe I do theme a class around a certain arm balance like handstand. And at the same time, we are tending and befriending all aspects of our experience. And this is actually why we are challenging ourselves in yoga classes, because we are noticing what happens when we meet our edge. We're noticing what happens when we butt up against something like our inability to do something. Can we respond to that with compassion and understanding and cultivating insight? So honoring and accepting exactly where we are and seeking to improve. So I think I want to say it's Shunryu Suzuki who was like, you're perfect just the way you are, and there's room for improvement. So it's that juxtaposition that I try to bring.
I have a follow-up question. And that is, in all the years I've been teaching yoga, when I speak to students afterwards, it seems like if I could narrow down like the concerns people have or the challenges they face on the yoga mat, which I think is true of how they move through life, is struggling with the idea of self-love. If you love yourself, you're arrogant and narcissistic. But if you don't love yourself, you have a low self-esteem. And how do we find, I mean, like, and that plays out on the yoga mat all the time. People are always like, oh my God, I look awesome. Get a camera so this can be on my Instagram feed. Or they're saying, oh my God, my body's too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, too this, too that. And internally, like, it's like I think this is a Sanskrit word. if I could share a Sanskrit word with you, a shitstorm of self-loathing. You know,
Uh-oh.
I may be mispronouncing that a little bit. I may have to work on the dialect
Hita
somewhat, but
Stormada.
yeah. Um, but no, I mean, we all encounter that on the yoga mat, and I think part of it is bringing it up and revealing that it's happening when it's under the surface. It's still affecting us; we're just not aware of it. But how do you deal with that when that comes up on your mat, and how do you invite your students to let go of some of that? Because if we can't love ourselves, good luck like having a healthy relationship with anyone else.
Where to begin? First,
You can
I'll
correct
just
my Sanskrit if you
offer.
like. I won't be hurt.
um, First, I'll just offer like a shortcut that sometimes helps some people love themselves better. Is that it will increase the quality of your relationship. So people with uh, high levels of self-love do have better relationships. And a huge reason for that is when you love yourself, you recognize that you deserve love. And as a result, you will do things like ask for what you want and express your needs. So loving yourself is actually a great way to help your partner love you. In other words, giving them guidance on how you would like to be loved and be an affirmation of love. So sometimes that's like a good, just quick way. I have trouble loving myself. Well, you know, guide your partner into loving you better and be a better and have them be a better partner to you. But I also feel like I want to do a little plug because when anytime you say the word yoga, it's going to bring up certain images depending on what somebody was conditioned to think about yoga. So like yesterday, I was hanging out with the Hare Krishnas at the ISKCON in Berkeley, and we were doing bhakti yoga, and we were singing and dancing, and that's yoga too. So you talk to a bhakti yogi, and yoga means something very different than somebody who is on Instagram and they type in yoga and they're like, oh, clearly yoga means contortion and other very advanced postures. And I feel a call just to make a plug for your class because Darren does teach a restorative yoga with hot stones. And that's yoga too. Lying down and giving yourself as much cushioning and support as you want, and then warming the heart with a hot stone or two hands on your heart. Taking care of yourself is yoga too. It's not just doing push-ups in a hot, sweaty room. It is being kind to ourselves. It is slowing down and being with the breath and being with ourselves.
Yeah. When I talk to parents, fellow parents, about, especially parents who are newer on the parenting journey, they've got smaller kids, and I have a teenager now. But they ask me, "Got any advice?" I'm like, "Do I ever?" But all the parenting books and stuff are great. But my one thing is self-care, because when I'm a good parent, when I'm doing what I think is the best job I can do and supporting and loving my son, it's when I'm quiet and calm and present. What he craves is not more activity, more, one more thing to get him to do or rush him off to this or that. It's quiet time. It's present. It's somebody who can just listen. I always share the story in class of when he was really little. I was rushing him off to childcare, trying to, so I could get to work. I've got a yoga class to get to. And he wasn't cooperating. And he said, "Daddy, can I hold your hand?" And I'm like, "Why?" "Fine." And I gave him my hand, and he closed his eyes for a minute. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm filling your heart because it's a little empty right now." It's like getting punched in the chest. Like when he was like 3 or 4 at the time. And but that self-care, whether you're parenting or teaching yoga or driving a city bus, when you use a tool like yoga to care for yourself, to nurture yourself, to get quiet, your ability to be present to whoever crosses your path increases exponentially. So thank you for those kind words. And you can come get hot stoned with me anytime.
Again, you bring up so many important points. I know we have limited time, so I'll just briefly summarize some things I'm hearing from you, which is absolutely kids learn a lot by modeling. So James Baldwin has this wonderful quote that children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. And I think a
Oh,
lot
I
of
love.
parents don't recognize that their kids are watching them all the time. So if you can model self-love, self-care, slowing down and taking care of yourself, your kid will pick up on that.
Hmm.
And this is something I tell people in partnership too. The absolute best thing you can do for yourself is work on yourself. By working on yourself, you are helping your partner. So the best thing that you can do for your kid is to work on yourself. And this is what psychology have found, that the strongest predictor of a child's well-being is the parent's self-understanding and awareness.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I have a feeling we share the same bookshelf because you've mentioned Thomas Merton, James Baldwin, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Yoga
We're
Sutras.
writers. We love good writing, Darren.
I feel like we go to the same library or something. Um, well, we need to wrap this, but I want to talk to you more. I'm wondering. Seven Lessons of Love is one of the books you have out, and you have a new one coming out in 2025. Is that correct? And
Yes.
we can do another conversation on that when it comes out. But what's the name of it, and what's it about, briefly?
My book that comes out next year, probably around May or June, is called Love and Suffering. So exactly what we've been talking about today. And my other books, other than Seven Lessons of Love, are
I just
poetry
want the first one.
collections.
Can I have the love
So,
and not the suffering?
sorry. Well, I was going to bring that up before because you mentioned there's a lot of suffering in life, and that is the first noble truth, a recognition of suffering. There is.
Yeah.
It's not that life is suffering. People often translate this incorrectly. It's that there is suffering in life. Or you might say, you can add a little bit of hope in there and say, life as we normally live it is suffering, which
Mm.
implies there is a way to live life without suffering.
Not to give away the end, but suffering can be overcome is another of the Four Noble Truths. So,
Yes, there's
yeah.
a path.
Yeah.
So,
Well, let's tell people how they can contact you if they want to. And we will definitely have you back on. So, zachbeach.com is your website. Your current book, one of your current books, is Seven Lessons of Love. And you are very available online, of course, social media, your website, and I will link to all of that in the show notes. And if people want to experience one of your amazing yoga classes, you teach in the Bay Area, and I believe you travel some and teach as well. Yes?
I used to travel a lot. I'm trying to put some roots down. So right now I'm in the Bay Area. I have like a joy breathing workshop next week. I'm planning a little retreat at Green Gulch Zen Center in Marin, also next year. And one of my books that might be of particular interest to your listeners is 108 Shavasana poems. So if you like words, if you like reading, and you like yoga, that's a wonderful book to try out.
Nice. My website is darrenmain.com, and you can find me on social, and I'll put links to all of that in the show notes, along with some other freebies like a free meditation class if you're interested. And we will be checking out the comments. So if you want to drop anything there, you can as well. Zach, it was so awesome to chat with you. And I want to take your breathing workshop.
Oh, yeah.
I do breathing workshops as well. And I love taking other people's breathwork classes because I love breathwork, and B, it's always fun to see how different people offer and see what the competition is, because yoga is really a competition amongst yoga teachers?
Well, as you know, as fellow writers, you've probably heard the quote: "Copying one person is plagiarism. Copying many people is research." So,
Ah.
you got to take 100 yoga classes, and then you can kind of combine your own stuff. But just to mention one thing about that, because so often we're told to notice the breath. Oh, just notice the breath, observe the breath, breathe the witness, be the consciousness, aware of the breath. But guess what? You can enjoy the breath. It's allowed. You
Hmm.
can experience joy with every breath that you take. And that was my intention for this workshop.
You're quoting Sting now.
Every breath you
Every,
take.
yeah. um, one more thing since you brought it up. I am an ex-smoker. I always tell people my very first yoga class, I left halfway through to go to the bathroom to have a cigarette, and then came back in like trailing, stinking like an ashtray. Um, so there is hope for
It was
all
a
of
sign
you.
of the times.
I was a dumpster fire then, and now I'm a dumpster fire that doesn't smoke. But I remember
You're
when I
burning
was
cleanly.
now I burn sage, so it's spiritual. Um, no, I remember when I was a smoker how I would just puff on a cigarette and just find such ecstasy in that act, that stop, that pause, the ritual of doing it, and then the deep inhale and the full exhale. And there was a moment years into my practice where I was doing pranayama and I realized that I'm breathing like I used to smoke. Like like the peace I felt from smoking was not from the pollutants I was inhaling.
Mm.
It was from the pause and the deep inhale and the exhalation. Of course, you don't have to fill your lungs with toxins to get that benefit. Is the message here before you go out and buy a pack of Camels? But anyway, uh,
Well, I want to appreciate that sentiment you're expressing, and I hope our listeners are picking up on Darren's lessons here. We have one, we all have imperfections, right? Yes, you're yoga teachers. We have our own little vices, our own little things. I have it, you have it, and we can accept and embrace all of our imperfections. And I love this just hopeful message that, like, yes, no matter what your past was, we can start our practice today, start our practice right now. Doesn't matter if you've been smoking 20, 30 years. Right now is an opportunity to plant the seeds in your garden that you wish to grow and pull out those weeds that don't serve you.
nice. I will, Zach. I will talk to you soon. I will see you in a class soon, I'm sure. And in the meantime, let's get you back on for another podcast in the very near future.